Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna East. I am currently a student at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I am currently taking Oz, an American fairy tale with Professor Dina Massachi. I learned about this project through my professor, Dina Massachi. And today I will be reading The Gauds of Oz, written by David Hulan, who is a longtime member of the Oz Club from Illinois who attended the conferences in the Midwest for many years. It is from the 1999 issue of Oziana and one of the last issues to be edited by Robin Olderman. It is part of the 50-year anniversary of Oziana. So let's get into the Guads of Oz, which I'm so excited to be reading for you guys today. Ow, Sampajo said, coming to interrupt Holt from his canter. What ails you, old friend? Asked his rider, Coram, Prince of Corumbia and the Yellow Knight of Oz. Lost a shoe, said the war horse. Prince Coram quickly dismounted and inspected the hoofs Sampajo was holding off the ground. It seems a clean loss, he said. No cracking or damage to the hoof, but I'll not be riding you till it is replaced. No, best not, the horse agreed. But it is a long walk to the castle and near dark already. The two had been patrolling the border between Corumbia and Samandra, whose rascally sultan had enchanted all the inhabitants of Corumbia and neighboring Corumbia over 500 years earlier. After the enchantments had been broken, thanks largely to an American boy named Speedy, Ozma had confined the sultan to within the borders of Samandra for the next 500 years. Still, other Samandrans occasionally left their own country to trouble their neighbors. And one of Prince Coram's duties was to ride along the border periodically to drive back any possible incursions. Everything had been peaceful on that day, but they were many miles from the castle and an uninhabited part of the kingdom. Methinks it would be unwise to travel through the forest in the dark, the prince said, but I hear a stream that promises water. There is a rich grass for you here, and I have my pocket tent, so we should be able to camp throughout the night, to camp overnight without hardship. Then we can make a slow way back to the castle in the morning. The two friends followed their heirs and soon found a beautiful little stream flowing out of a rocky grotto in the side of a small hill. There was a clearing with ample space for the prince's tent, carpeted with thick green grass. As soon as Coram removed his bridle and saddle and gave him a quick rub down, Sapadro began grazing. The prince removed his armor, stretched luxuriously, and then removed a miniature tent from his pocket. He had acquired it on a visit to the neighborhood kingdom of Agabu, and this was far from the first time that it had saved him from sleeping under the stars. He placed it on the ground, and it instantly grew until it was of ample size to house him to comfort. He had bread and cheese in Sampajo saddlebags left over from his luncheon, and the water in the stream would provide him with drink. He had heard from some of the young Americans who lived in the Oz that drink directly from a stream in the great outside world was far from safe, but there is no illnesses in the Oz, so there was no risk to him. He leaned back against a tree and sighed contentedly. I am sorry that you lost your shoe, but not so sorry to spend the night away from the castle. A knight should have adventures, and life has been so peaceful of late that even so small a thing as an unexpected night of camping out refreshes me. With that, a greater adventure beckoned. Sampajo nodded. Of all the other Caribbeans, he most shared Coram's desire for action, as might be expected. He had been trained as a war horse, as Coram had been trained as a knight hundreds of years earlier. When Oz was far from the peaceful land it had become under Ozma's gentle rule, they would not have had it otherwise, since both knew that most Ozites were far better off and happier now, but they felt an urge now and again to conquer giants and dragons, overthrow wicked rulers, and in general serve the land in some more vigorous way than by simply behaving themselves. Twilight was gathering, and so Coram unpacked his bread and cheese and filled a cup from the stream. The water was deliciously cold and sweet, a fine accompaniment to his food, and he was soon comfortably full. He debated building a campfire, but the evening was mild and he decided that there was no need. Excuse me. It was still early to retire his tent, but he could barely see Sempedro standing nearby and drinking from the stream. Suddenly, the horse snorted. "Come see this," he said. Coram rose to his feet and walked over to where Sempedro was standing. Something was glowing at the bottom of the stream. The water was only a few inches deep, so Coram rolled up his sleeve, lay down on the bank, and reached out to pick up whatever it was. Whenever he got a look closer at it, he whistled in amazement. The jewels that the outside world values so highly, diamonds, emeralds, rubies, sapphires, are so common in Oz that they are used to decorate buildings. In the Ozer Islands, indeed, sapphires, sapphires are used instead of gravel on paths, and King Shambardo's crowns is set with the cobblestones because they are relatively rare there. But in his hand, Coram held a jewel unlikely any he had ever seen before, a stone the size of a pigeon's egg, with the look of a coal from a smith's fire, though it was quite cool to touch. "Haste seen aught like this before?" he said. He asked Sempedro. "Never," the horse replied. "Likelier you than I. In the days when you were Sir Hocus of Pokes in the Emerald City, and I've seen not like it, then or before or since. Well, 'twill make a lovely Guad for Princess Mary Golden when we return to the castle." He carefully stowed it in Sempedro's saddlebag, and then it occurred to him that there might be more. It was almost fully dark now, and the moon would not rise for another hour or two. With only starlight, any more of the glowing gems should be easy to see, even under the water. To his delight, he quickly found 3 more, though none as large as the first. By this time, it was too dark to see anything but the contrast between the starlit sky and the trees overhead. He could only find the stream by touch and sound. But wait, was there a faint glow just above the ground, level to his right? So he crept along the bank of the stream, locating himself by dabbling his left hand in the water until he felt the ground begin to rise, and he was just able to see the glow, outlining the opening into the grotto from which the stream was flowing. He couldn't reach the opening from the bank, so after pulling off his leggings and tucking them under his nightly belt where he could find them again, he stepped out into the middle of the stream and bent to look into the opening. Inside, the bed of the stream was covered with gems, most smaller, but some even larger than the first one he had found. And he could see further back into the hollow, that there were even more gems embedded in the walls. Now, knowing how many gems I might find with a pick and a shovel, he thought, but that would be greedy. They've lain here for a long time, and this is a charming spot. If I dug it up, it might spot the flow of the stream and surely would muddy it for a long time. So while he helped himself to all of the gems that lay loose on the stream bed inside the grotto, which were quite enough to fill one side of Stampadro's saddlebag, he left behind those that were still out of reach. Hayes ever seen gems like this? Coram asked the court jeweler, spreading a handful across the old man's work table. Nah, Highness. Happened. I've heard of one such, though. Many years ago, before we were all enchanted, a fisherman found it in the belly of a great fish he was cleaning and took it to good King Winkslas back when he was uniting the West of Oz and giving his name to the country. He made it to the centerpiece of his crown. I know not where it might be today, perhaps in the possession of our current emperor or Queen Ozma. That rare then, Coram mused. What might they be called? If they are the same Winkslas called his of Firestone, a good name in sooth, Met thought. They resembled hot embers when first I saw them. Well, enough of this. I wish you to make these up into an assortment of pretty gods, antiquements, most for Princess Marigolden, but something for our mothers, the queens of Columbia and Corabia, and a gift each for Queen Ozma and 3 little mortal maids who live with her, Dorothy, Betsy, and Trout. The jeweler took his head. I am sorry, Highness, but I cannot. Cannot? Oddsfish, why not? I'm a craftsman, Highness, and may say without conceit a good one. Give me a piece of jewelry and I can copy it so exactly that the maker of the original might be hard put to know it from his own. But I am not an artist and have no idea either how to best cut these stones or how to mount them to best advantage. You need a far great jeweler than I to deal with these rare stones. Coram was disappointed, but could understand the jeweler's feelings. So then, where might I find such a jeweler? I can only guess, but I would think that the Emerald City would be the place to start the search, at least. It is by far the greatest city in Oz, and it would be the most natural for the finest master workers in any craft to gather there. Even if there is a more skillful jeweler elsewhere, someone in the Emerald City will probably know it. A good thought, Master Jeweler. Coram sat gathering up the firestones and returning them to his pouch. He climbed the stairs to his chambers, where he found his beautiful wife waiting somewhat impatiently. And where were you all night? She asked. Coram explained about Stampadro's lost shoe and an unexpected need to walk the last 5 miles to the castle. Not so easy wearing armor, I trow. And hot and dusty withal, she said with a smile, kissing him warmly. I'll ring to have a servant bring hot water for a bath. Excellent, wife. There is naught I need more. Half an hour later, much more comfortable, after having provided a hot bath and a clean garments, Coram sat down in his favorite chair and looked fondly at Marigolden stitching away at her latest bed of embroidery. 'Twas fortunate in a way that Stampadro lost that shoe, he said. Had he not, I had not found these. And he pulled out a handful of the firestones and held them out to her. They're gorgeous, she breathed. What are they? The jeweler calls them firestones, but says he's only heard of one before, and that was long before the enchantment. Will he cut and set them? Nah, he thinks himself too much of a craftsman and not enough of an artist. He recommended I go to the Emerald City to find the best drawer in Oz. A good idea, and I'll go with you. I would see the latest fashions and visit the Ozma and Dorothy and the others. Coram was taken by surprise at her firm statement, but after a moment's reflection, he saw no harm in it. Mary Golden had proved her courage and resilience years before when Speedy had rescued her from Subterrana and brought her back to Oz. She would be a worthy traveling companion. Why not then? We must, of course, take Cammy so he can visit with his old friends there. But was prefer to ride him or ride Buttercup? Dear old Cammy, Mary Golden said, her face softening. And it would not hurt his feelings. I'd rather ride Buttercup. He may be the most comfortable camel in the world, but that's still less comfortable than a good horse like Buttercup. They took the journey in easy stages, skirting the Great Gilkin Forest to spend the first night in Camballo with Kinda, Jolly, and Rosa Mary. Indeed, they enjoyed their host so much that they stayed through the next day and night as well, before riding to perhaps City to spend the next night with Pierre Haps. The fourth night they spent with a friendly Rinky farmer near the border with the green country around the capital, and around noon of the fifth day, they entered the Emerald City itself. They rode directly to the palace stables, where they left Cammy exchanging news with his old friend. The doubtful dromedary and Simpadro and Buttercup continually munching oats. They were on their way to the front doors, and when a little girl dashed from behind a lilac bush and hugged Coram about his waist, Sir Hocus, she cried, I haven't seen you in forever. Indeed, it's been a long time, Dorothy, the knight said with a twinkle in his eye, patting her on the back. And Mary Golden, I'm glad to see you too, of course, but I've spent so much time with Sir Hocus, or I guess I should call him Prince Coram. Now, after all I did, discover him. And you not be like we all would be enchanted yet, Mary Golden sat with a smile, except that I would have gone to live with Speedy and his uncle in America and be quite an old lady by now, I suppose. But what brings you to Emerald City? Does Ozma know you're here? Nah, she doesn't know. She doesn't, though I go now to make my divorce to her. As to why we are here, I seek the finest jewelry in Oz for a special task. I've heard Mr. Osgood is the best jeweler in the Emerald City, but I don't know all about Oz. Perhaps Ozma would know. The three of them chatted merrily as they made their way to Ozma's throne room, where the beautifully young Queen of Oz was holding court. Prince Coram, Mary Golden, welcome to the Emerald City, Ozma exclaimed. I thank your majesty, Coram said, advancing near to the throne and then dropping onto one knee and bowing his head. Mary Golden followed him and dropped a deep courtesy. Rise, good night, Ozma smiled. Your courtly manners are much better than those of most of my subjects. No more than you deserve, Coram said. Ozma laughed, for despite her high rank and ancient lineage, she still felt herself to be a little more than another young girl, no more exalted than Dorothy or Betsy or Trout, the mortal maids who were her closest friends and companions. What brings you here? It's been many years since your last visit. In part, it has been over long since we visited with our old friends here, but the proximate cause was my discovery of some drawers and a desire to find the finest drawers in Oz to cut and set them. There are several fine drawers in the Emerald City, Ozma said thoughtfully, but I don't know if they are the finest in Oz. I'll inquire among the members of my court to see if they know more on the subject. In the meantime, I'm sure you would like to rest and refresh yourselves after your long journey. Dorothy, why don't you find Julia and have her take them to a guest suite? As they were leaving the throne room, Dorothy said, I suppose that you did have a long ride to get here. Lately, the wizard's new transportation pills have made it so easy for us to go to places that I was forgetting that you might be tired. Oh, we're not so tired as all that, Mary Golden said. We didn't ride very far any one day, but Perhearth, tell me more about the pills. Why? The wizard has come up with a new kind of travel pills that lets you wish yourself anywhere in Oz, and you're there in a flash. And since they can't be used for anything else, he's been happy to give them out to anyone who wanted them. A mighty magic, Coram said. I should like to have such pills myself. I could visit you here much more often with less planning and endeavor. Here, then, Dorothy said, pulling a small pill box from the pocket of her dress. I'll give you a few of mine, though I'm sure the wizard will be happy to give you more when you see him. He's proud of this invention. She spilled half a dozen of the pills into her hand and gave them to Knight. I thank you, Princess Dot, Coram said gratefully. And I find that the finest jeweler in Oz is not here in the Emerald City. I can make my way to him in less time than by riding. Coram and Mary Golden enjoyed their luxury of long baths, hot baths, and exchanged their dusty traveling garments for the courtly garb that was always provided for Ozma's guests. Julia Jam had provided plates of sandwiches and a pitcher of Ozade for them. Since they had arrived too late for lunch and after they had eaten, Mary Golden said, Dorothy promised to take me to Jenny Jump's style shop to try out the latest fashion and clothing this afternoon. I suppose you might want to visit the local jewelers. Sardines, Coram said. We shall meet here, then perhaps an hour before dinner. Very well, Dorothy. Very well, the princess agreed and departed to find Dorothy. Coram decided to check on Cammy, Stimpadro, and Buttercup before leaving the palace grounds. So his first destination was the stables. The animals assured him that they were quite content where they were. So he started out through the palace gardens to the front gate. He was passing a large butterfly bush when a sharp voice spoke from its depths. Where are you bound? I seek the finest jeweler in Oz, Coram said, peering into the bush to see who was addressing him. Well, you won't find him that way, the glass cat said, emerging from the shadows. Wherefore not? Because the finest jeweler in Oz doesn't live in the Emerald City. He lives in the Yamaguchi Mountains in the far north of Gillikin country. Coram knew that the glass cat was probably the greatest explorer in Oz, and her opinion was extremely valuable. He thought a moment and then knelt beside the cat and opened the bag of gems to show her. Has ever seen gems like this before, noble cat? Only one, and that was Joro's prized possession. He was a master drawer that I was just telling you about. He cut it and set it in a ring that he's never without. Then this Joro is the man I need. Coram closed the bag, rose to his feet, and took one of Dorothy's traveling pills from his pockets. Tossing it into his mouth, he said, I want to be at the home of Joro in the Yamaguchi Mountains, and disappeared. Wait, I didn't. Oh, bother. I was too late. He was always the impulsive sort, the cat grumbled. Coram found himself standing on a path in the midst of a range of rocky mountains, facing a large stone house about half a mile away. It was guarded by a moat and a drawbridge that was up. It was not quite a castle, but it was still a formidable hold, and he wondered what impelled Joro to live in such well-defended place. He approached the moat and shouted, Hail, Master Jeweler, I come from afar with noble work for you. Canst admit me? After a few moments, the drawbridge began to creak downward, and Coram felt a prickle of awareness when he saw that it had been concealing an 8-foot tall giant who bore a large club. My master bids you enter, the giant said in a deep voice. But if you waste his time, you will regret it. At this point, Coram began to wish that he had worn his armor, sword, and shield, but he gave no sign of this to the giant, striding proudly across the bridge. When he entered the house, he was somewhat surprised at its borrowed brick luxury. From the outside, it had appeared completely forbidden, but the interior was beautifully furnished. The walls were covered with tapestries depicting events from ancient Oz history. The rooms were illuminated by lamps that added to their light by refraction through the many jewels with which they were decorated, and the furnishings were exquisitely carved wood, augmented with soft silken cushions where one might sit. Joro, whatever his temperament was, clearly a man of impeccable artistic taste and a lover of comfort. The giant led Coram through 2 inner rooms and into a great hall, nearly as large as the throne room in his father's palace, and a great deal more lavishly decorated. A tall, thin man sat behind a desk at the far end of the room, and as Coram approached, he could see the man was glaring at him from under bushy black eyebrows. What have you here? The man rasped. I am Coram, Prince of Corumbia and Yellow Knight of Oz, Coram said in a steady voice. I am told that you are the finest jeweler in Oz. I am the finest jeweler anywhere, the man said, but I have made jewelry only for myself for over a century now. Coram could see the glow of a firestone on Jor's finger. It was indeed beautifully cut to show off the fire of the stone, and was in a gold settling that complemented it perfectly. This is an unusual ring there, he said casually. It is unique, Joro said complacently. There is no such stone anywhere else in the world, and I paid a mighty price for it. How so, Coram asked, always interested in a good story. Many years ago, the northern part of Gilligan country was ruled by a powerful sorceress named Galliat. You may have heard of her. I've heard the stories of her marriage to Quillalia and the enchantment of the winged monkeys. I know but little else of her. Then you know of the famous golden cap that allowed its owner to command the winged monkeys 3 times? I do. I made that cap as a wedding present from Galliat to Quillalia. Coelalia. Though, of course, at the time I made it, there was no enchantments on it. I am a jeweler, not a sorcerer. It was my masterpiece, and in exchange for it, Gilead gave me half her kingdom. But I found that my nature took no pleasure in rolling over Gillikens. I do not think that I was a bad roller, but neither I was a good one. And Gilead, who was renowned for her goodness, regretted her bargain. Since I regretted it as well, we reached what we consider a fair exchange. She returned the golden cap to me, enchantment and all, and I returned my half of the kingdom to her, except for the house and a square mile around it. I had no real use for the charm on the cap, so I never used it. But one day, an old woman came to visit me. She was a powerful witch, and by the use of her magic arts, she had destroyed the last hair of good King Winkless and had obtained his firestones. She cared nothing for the drawers, but she wanted the golden cap. I, on the other hand, felt that I must have that unique jewel and had no real use for the cap. So once again, I traded. Most interesting, Coram said. I am pleased to see that you are so skilled and that you have already learned how to cut and set firestones. Excuse me. Though I regret to say that yours is not as unique as you thought. And he opened his bag and spilled hundreds of them onto the desktop. Joro screeched, tearing at his hair. Then he looked past Coram to the giant and said, "Seize him." Coram felt himself grabbed from behind by the giant, and despite his own strength and valor, he was handled as if he were a small child. "Throw him in the dungeon," Joro said. "I must consider what to do with him and with these jewels." Coram reached for his pocket. If only he could swallow one of the transportation pill quickly. But the giant clamped a hand on his and ripped the pocket completely off, spilling the pills onto the floor. "You'll regret this," he then said. "My friends in the Emerald City will find me and punish you if you imprison me." "Oh, I think not," Joro said. "Part of my bargain with Gilead was that she put up a barrier that allows no magic penetrate into my domain from outside. Bombado, here is only one of my giant servants. Everyone knows Ozma's army doesn't fight, and my servants will make sure that no one can physically enter my domain without my consent, as they would have to do to use magic against me." And with that, he bent his head to contemplate the pile of firestones, while Mubado carried Coram out through a plain stone passage and down a long flight of stairs to a deep dungeon. He shoved the knight into the cell without either malice or compassion and slammed the door behind him. Then he turned with a great key in the lock and said, "My master will decide your fate soon, I'm sure. I'm also fairly sure that you won't enjoy it." And he turned and walked away. A magical lamp gave a feeble amethyst light that enabled Coram to examine the cell. It was evidently below the level of the walls and foundation of the hole, because the walls and floor were hard-packed earth rather than stone. This was probably just as well. Earth is softer and smoother than stone, and it rained seldom enough in Oz that he didn't think that dampness would be a problem. There being nothing else useful to do, he embraced the universal solution of the fighting man and went to sleep. Bombado had brought food and water 3 times, and Coram had slept twice. When he noticed a few flakes of dirt skirting down the wall from a point near the ceiling of his cell. As he stood to investigate, more dirt fell, and a moment later, a furry face peered out from a hole in the wall. "You're Prince Coram?" the woodchuck asked. "I am," Coram said. "In whom have I have the honor of addressing?" "Call me Ishmael. It is not my name, but I've always wanted to say that, and it's good enough. To tell the truth, we woodchucks don't use names among ourselves." "Then welcome to my cell, Ishmael. And what are you doing here?" "Setting you free. You wish yourself here before the glass cat could warn you about Joro. So she was sure you'd find yourself in prison. Since she can't swallow pills, she asked me to help out. So I wished myself as close as I could get and didn't have any problem dodging the giant guards. They're watching out for humans. Then it was just a matter of digging, and I do that very well." "Many thanks, friend Ishmael, but how will you free me?" "I have some transportation pills I got from Trout not long ago when I helped her escape the delves. We can each use one of to get back to the Emerald City." He handed Coram a pillbox, and the knight helped himself to one of the pills. The woodchuck took another one, and then both wished themselves back in the capital. "My undying gratitude, good Ishmael. And ever you need knightly succor, you have but to let me know of it." "I'll keep that in mind, Prince," the woodchuck said, "but for now I'll say goodbye." And he vanished under a lilac bush. And that is how I was despoiled of my jewels, Your Majesty, Coram concluded. "I ask now your permission and a supply of the wizard's pills so that I can return to Columbia and enlist the other knights of the kingdom to go with me to conquer the giants and recover my property." Though they had left Caribbean when they heard the terms of the contest for Mary Golden's hand, the green, red, black, and gray knights had soon realized that the Oz they had known was 500 years gone everywhere except Columbia and Caribbean. One by one, they had returned and had taken service under the King of Columbia in order to be associated with Coram. They too had long wished for more action than modern Oz generally afforded. Ozma shook her head gently. "I am sorry, Coram, but I cannot permit violence in my domain. I know that Joro used violence against you, but he did not ask my permission. And it is true that no magic can work on him from outside his square mouth. Gilead's magic is very powerful," the wizard replied. "She perhaps as strong as sources as Glinda, since they were never rivals. There was never occasions for them to match their powers. I'll study my books, but I think it is unlikely that I could affect him or his servants from outside his estate." The next day, a number of celebrities gathered in Ozma's throne to hear the result of the wizard's research. His frowns telegraphed his conclusion. "The barrier is very formidable from the outside," he said, "somewhat like my steel wall that can be destroyed by a pin. From the inside, the barrier can be eliminated by any competent magic worker from the inside, but I doubt even Glinda could affect it from the outside." "Then what we need is to get a magic worker inside," Dorothy exclaimed. "And how do we do that? If we can't use balance against his giants, they'll stop any magic worker from getting inside," Coram said sadly. "It's a pity the scarecrow isn't here," Scarp said. "I'm sure his excellent brains would give us an answer." If there is an answer, the wizard said, I'll admit that it has me stumped. Oh, there's an answer, Scraps said airily. And you know it, Lady Patchwork. Pray tell us, Coram said. Oh, all right, she said. I can tell you in 2 words, the lonesome duck. That's the 3 words, Dorothy said. But you have a point. The lonesome duck could fly in. And even though it is not all that good magic worker, it does have some magic, but it is awfully selfish. As I remember, even if it could help us, I don't know if it would. I recollected, was mightily proud of its diamond's palace. Captain Bill said, do you think it would like a couple of them firestones to decorate it? An excellent thought, Coram said. Unfortunately, I didn't take quite all my firestones with me to Joro. I left 3 if they had a sufficient reward. But wizard, do you think the duck could work the magic we require? It's a simple enough spell, the wizard said, and the duck is good enough at a simple magic. Yes, I'm sure it could break Galiet's special spell from inside the Joro's estate. Transportation pills brought Coram and the wizard to a spot on the bank of Munchkin River, just on Gillikin side of the Munchkin border. A large duck was gliding gracefully along the river near them. Hail, lonesome duck, Coram called. Let's grant us audience a brief time. The duck changed course and glided to the bank where it waddled awkwardly up to them. I know you. You're the Wizard of Oz, it said, but who's your companion? I am Prince Coram of Corumbia. Also Yslep, the Yellow Knight of Oz, Coram said. And what do you want? Nobody ever comes to see me unless they want something from me because I haven't any family or any friends. A simple enough thing, the Coram said. And continue by explaining their need for a magic worker inside Joro's estate. I know Joro, the duck said, not a very nice man, but a wonderful Joro. But why should I help you? It's a 2-hour flight to the Zamaguchi Mountains and as long a one back. And you're no friend of mine any more than anyone else. We have transportation pills that will take you within half a mile of Joro's house. So your flight will be short. And if you will help us, these are yours. And he held out the 3 firestones to the duck. Ah, they will complement my diamond palace beautifully, the duck said. Very well. Do you know the spell I need to use inside the estate, wizard? Or must I work it out when I get in there? I know it, he said, and the 2 musicians promptly entered into a conversation that meant nothing to Coram. After a few minutes, however, the wizard announced that they were ready and they transported themselves to Joro's estate. 2 giants who were even larger than Brambato stood on the road just in front of them. Coram began being equipped now with armor, sword, and shield, rather hoped that they would attack him. But they remained stolidly in place, staring at the 2 men. The duck flew away, circling around the estate until it was out of sight. The wizard, meanwhile, was setting up a tripod and a brazier in the path. That'll do you no good. One of the giants jeered. Magic can't touch us in here. The wizard smiled and placed a few pieces of charcoal in the brazier. Then he set it on fire with a magical lighter. White smoke arose and drifted slowly toward the giants. I think the duck should have done its job by now, he said, and dropped a pinch of grain powder onto the fire, uttering 4 magic words at the same time. Immediately, a huge cloud of green smoke rose from the brazier and whipped itself around the giants. Then it straightened out and streamed toward Joro's house, while the giants stood motionless where they had been when the smoke touched them. Good enough, the wizard said, dusting his hands. They won't move until I give them an antidote, nor will Joro or anyone else inside his house. Let's go find your jewels. They were just darting across the drawbridge when the lonesome duck swooped down and landed beside them. I want my reward now, it exclaimed. And you have more than earned it, Coram said. He placed the 3 firestones on the bridge and asked, "What's like a transportation pill?" "No, I'll fly myself. It's not that far." And without a word of thanks, the duck scooped up the jewels in its beak and flew away. Not the most polite of creatures, Coram remarked. "No, but useful," the wizard answered. Coram led the way through the inner rooms where Bombados and 2 other giants stood frozen in place and into Joro's great hall. The jeweler was not there, however, and they had to spend nearly an hour searching the mansion before they finally found him in a workshop on the 3rd floor. Coram whistled because Joro had already cut more than a dozen of the stones to brilliant effect and had made a tiara that was the most beautiful piece of jewelry they had ever seen. The wizard was equally impressed. He may not be a very good man, but he's a marvelous jeweler. Can't waken him alone without his giant servants? Certainly, the wizard said. Do you want me to do that? I do. Alone, he is not a threat to us, and I still hope to strike a bargain with him. The wizard took a small jar of powder from his black bag and sprinkled a pinch onto Joro's head. At first, the jeweler was in a blind rage, but Coram calmly subdued him and finally was able to make him listen. Robbery is forbidden in the Oz, he said, and you could not be allowed to succeed in your plan. But I was always willing to share the firestones with you in return for your work in cutting and setting some of the stones for me. I had in mind to give you 1/3 of the stones for your work. Joro was dumbfounded. You would have done that and I could have kept my magical protections? I would have, because you treated me so ill. However, I'll take this lovely god. He held up the tiara and give it to my lady wife, Mary Golden. And then I'll divide the remaining stones with you, and you agree to cut and set my stones. And how do we divide these stones? By count, by weight, by count, but we'll choose in turns. I'll choose 2 and then you'll choose 1. I'll choose 2 more, and you 1 more, and so on until all have been chosen. It's a bargain. One more condition. To be sure that the stones do not get mixed, a 3rd party will hold your stones until you have finished cutting and setting mine. Fair enough, I suppose, Joro grumbled. I've given you little enough cause to trust me. If the wizard will hold my stones, that will satisfy me. 2 months later, the court of Columbia was the site of glittering spectacle. Joro had finished cutting and setting Coram's firestones, and by means of transportation pills, a considerable array of celebrities had gathered to allow Coram to make his presentations. Mary Golden was already wearing the tiara, which she had loved from the first moment she set eyes on it. But Coram chose to make his gifts in order of the rank of the recipient. For Ozma, Queen of Oz, Joro had produced a golden scepter with one of the largest of the firestones mounted at its tip and a helix of small ones winding up from the grip. It was not, of course, enchanted like Ozma's wand, but it would provide a most impressive display on state occasions. Glinda, the good sources and queen of the Quadlings, receive a brooch, and Nick Chopper, the imperior of the Winkies, a meticulous crafted tin flower with a cluster of firestones as its center. Dorothy and Trout as princesses of the Oz, and Betsy Bobbin as their closest friend and honorary princess, each received pendants, and the wizard was given an elaborate watch fob. There were more gifts for the kings and queens of Caribia in quite large number to add to Mary Golden's collection. And yet one more, Coram concluded, for the one who rescued me from Durance vow, the golden collar set with firestones is for you, Ishmael to wear when we choose. The woodchuck who had almost refused the invention because he didn't know most of the other guests came forward while the assembled celebrities and courtiers cheered. Could come in very handy, he said. Light my way down in the burrows and all, I thank your highness. And they all adjourned to the banqueting hall where such a feast had not been since the wedding of Coram and Mary Golden. The end.